All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Mary. I guess I'm a two-time speaker like SNL, Alec Baldwin, and Emma Stone. Pretty great. So I am a research associate at Transit Center. We're a private foundation that uses our endowment to support and improve public transit in cities across the country. And we do that through technical assistance to transit advocates and transit agencies. We produce tools like the one that I will tools and reports like the one that I will show tonight that kind of use data and writer experience to kind of combat myths about transit that kind of predominate the industry. We also worked with Axis Maps on this project. They are a group that produces interactive, custom-built interactive maps. I already said interactive, and they're really great. You should check them out if you're interested in mapping. Um, so, why did we build this tool? Recently, over the past 5 years or so, transit ridership has declined in most agencies around the country. And policymakers and transit planners are kind of asking, why is this happening, and how should we respond? Decisions in investment, in planning, and in policy made at the local level have a really big impact on transit. And so at the local level, leaders have really the opportunity to shape transit for their transit service and outcomes for their constituents. Um, and there are some advocates and journalists also have the ability to influence the conversation at the local level as well by communicating what's happening with transit and pushing for better outcomes. Um, However, there is a great need for standardized data at the local level, and there is kind of a lack of standardized local data that talks to each other and that can be incorporated so that you can compare trends over time, or so that you can compare, one agency in California to another agency in California to really get a better understanding of how local decisions are impacting outcomes. So, there's the National Transit Database that is operated by the FTA or put together by the FTA that has a lot of data. It's released monthly and annually, and basically is standardized for every transit agency that receives funding from the FTA. So basically every transit agency in the country, but it's pretty clunky to use. If you go to it, you're gonna download a CSV file like this, and to like look up a quick fact will take you, it won't be immediate. You're not gonna, you're gonna have to put in some work to get your information. Obviously, every transit agency has its own, source, its own information that it posts in various ways. This is just an example of, finding data through Metro, which operates in Houston, Texas. You can go to the website. You might be able to find ridership data. You might be able to find routes. You might be able to find schedule data. Some of it might be in non-workable formats. You can also, if you're adept at data, you can access data through GTFS feeds. But if you're like me and you don't really know how to do that, you're kind of limited in what you can receive. There's also the census. Demographic data is important to transit ridership. Anyways, that is to say that none of this is in the same place. If you're just trying to look up something quickly, it's kind of hard to do that. If you're trying to compare one agency to the other, you're somewhat limited in your ability to do that as well. So we decided to create a tool that kind of puts all of these data resources in one place and makes it really easy to compare transit ridership and other factors over time and across different regions. Um, so this is Transit Insights. It is on our website. The link for it is insights.transitcenter.org. And we unveiled it last month, so it's pretty new. Basically, it incorporates the major data sources that I talked about, so the NTD, National Transit Database, US Census, as well as spatial data from Transitland, which is a great resource if you're looking for the shape files for transit routes and stops. And so I think I'm just gonna dive right in. I'll go over what you can do with Transit Insights. Um, so you're going to uh, come up to this is the default page. This is just an intro to how to use the tool. Demonstrates a few different facts that you can find, but I'm going to close out of that because I'm going to show you how to use the tool. So this is the main default page. You'll see a national map with bubbles representing every transit agency that we have data for, or you know some are aggregated. The small ones are aggregated into an other category, but and on the left sidebar, we see the transit indicators that we grabbed from NTD, and they're shown kind of in a trend line, or the parallel coordinate plot shows basically the change in each indicator over the time period. So you can kind of see how indicators maybe change together or go in opposite directions. If you want to look at an like a region, a metropolitan statistical area, you can toggle to that. Or a transit agency is maybe more useful for most people, looking at data at the transit agency level. And you can use the compare function to basically select a custom or select a default list, like the top 10 agencies by ridership, or to select an agency that you're interested in learning more about. Oops, I did that wrong. um, and if you want to look at the neighborhood level demographic data, as well as the shape files, and if you want to see where transit is, you can zoom in. As you zoom in, more routes will show. And we have this filter feature that basically lets you look only at routes that are within walking distance of frequent transit. So in Chicago, we see that's mostly in the downtown core. Makes sense. Oh, and finally, there's a download feature. So if you want to just get the CSV file of the National Transit Database data for the agencies, you can just click that and you have it. You don't have to fiddle around with the tool looking for a fact that, whatever you're looking for. So I'm just going to run through, I think I have time. Kind of an example of how you can use this to compare and learn about what's happening at agencies or an agency. So I'm going to we're going to take a look at Cleveland's GCRTA. I always mix up the C and the R, and CODA in Columbus, Ohio. So they're in the same state. You would expect that they're that they have some of the same challenges when it comes to funding, but they've experienced really different transit outcomes over the past decade. So we can see here, this is GCRTA in Cleveland. This is CODA in Columbus. CODA has increased ridership above average, and at a rate faster than the national average, while GCRTA has really lost quite a bit of ridership, down 43% from 2006 to 2017. So why is that happening? We can take a look at some of the indicators on the side panel, and we will see that if this will switch. Oh yeah, okay. One thing, vehicle revenue miles, which is basically a measure of the service that the agency is providing. In Cleveland, we see that figure is in the red. GCRTA has cut vehicle revenue miles over the past decade, whereas in Columbus, it's actually increased quite substantially by 78%. So service has increased in Columbus, it has decreased in Cleveland. That's maybe something contributing to the ridership trend. Fares, people generally don't like paying, higher fares for transit. And we see that in Cleveland, fares have increased by 64% over the past decade, and that's well above the average for the nation. They've had several fare hikes. Meanwhile, and this is adjusted for inflation, in Columbus, fares have basically stayed the same. Um, so maybe that's something else contributing. Um, we can zoom in to each of the regions and take a look at, where their transit is and how it's serving people. Um, and here's what's happening in Cleveland. It seems like they've had a lot of population decline. And when we look at, where that's happening in relation to where transit is, we see that even along their frequent network, which is, going to be the most useful for people, you have to wait, less than 15 minutes to board a vehicle during, most of the day. There's still a lot of population decline. Versus if we go to, oops, um, we go to Columbus, we see one, that their frequent network is, I guess, more comprehensive around the city. There are fewer gaps, so more of the city is served by frequent transit, but also um, the frequent network is serving areas that are growing. So that's a good thing. That means that there are transit is able to connect more people to more destinations. So that is a brief rundown. And let me just go back to my presentation really quickly. Here are the resources that you should know about if you're interested in checking out Transit Insights. The GitHub page was produced by Access Maps, and it basically shows, all of the code that is operating the application. You can learn more about us and Access Maps and Interline, which is the group that runs Transitland, that provides the shapefiles. And then here are the data sources for Transit Insights as well. And I'll end with saying that if you do check out Transit Insights and you notice something that you think could be better, we're going to update the application, as data sources are updated annually, and we'd like to also update features as that happens. So please contact ridership@transitcenter.org if you have feedback or questions about the tool too. So thank you. Yeah. We don't have ride sharing data, and we haven't incorporated that, in this tool. Um, so not yet. Yeah. Yep. Sorry, I couldn't hear. So one thing that I think would be really useful right now, we have all of the indicators basically for the entire agency. Um, we have ridership by different modes. I think it would be great to have the indicators by each mode, because investment decisions are made very differently for like bus versus rail at agencies. So that's one thing on my mind. We've noticed that there are some routes that are missing from the shapefile, so some fixes like that also. But yeah, anything is on the table. You can send it. Not saying it'll get on the map, but yeah.